At 7:42 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday morning, a single press statement from Kash Patel exploded across social media. Denzel Washington is dangerous. What he's spreading isn't free speech. It's cultural sabotage. He needs to be shut down. Fast. The quote wasn't vague. It was an open declaration. Attached was a still frame from a panel Denzel had attended at UCLA, his hand mid-gesture, eyes burning with focus, lips slightly parted. Beneath the image, the caption read, "This isn't artistic expression. It's manipulation disguised as morality." Within minutes, shut down, Denzel was trending on X. Within the hour, pundits and influencers, especially those aligned with national security interests, were reposting it. Cable news anchors parsed every word. Panelists on morning shows grinned knowingly, reading it like scripture. But what no one expected, what not even Kash Patel could have foreseen, was how Denzel Washington would respond. Not with a tweet, not with a press release, but with a microphone, a camera, and every single accusation read aloud, unedited and unapologetic. But that moment was still hours away. At 8:07 a.m., Denzel sat in the back of a black SUV, scrolling through his phone. He didn't blink at Kash's statement, didn't even raise an eyebrow. His publicist, Rachel, was already in damage control. She had already tagged CNN, MSNBC, The Hollywood Reporter. "He wants you blacklisted," she whispered. Denzel stared out the window, calm as still water. "He doesn't want me blacklisted," he said quietly. "He wants me erased." He turned to Rachel. "What time is that panel at USC today?" 3 o'clock, live streamed on YouTube, aired on PBS and CS-PAN. Denzel nodded. "Good. Get me everything he said, every word, every line. I'm going to read it, live on stage." Rachel blinked. "You're going to respond? To him?" Denzel looked her dead in the eye. "No, I'm going to hold up a mirror. Let the whole country see who's really afraid of words." By 10:30 a.m., screenshots of Kash Patel's statement had crossed ideological lines. Even moderate entertainers and journalists were stunned. A national security official just said a private citizen should be silenced. That's not patriotism. That's authoritarianism in a necktie. Denzel didn't post. He didn't speak. He prepared. While Kash added fuel to the fire, labeling Denzel's words as coded radicalism and Hollywood extremism, Denzel printed out every single line, highlighted them, and tucked them neatly into a leather-bound folder. And at 2:15 p.m., when he stepped out of the car in front of the USC Norris Theater, broadcast trucks already lined the street. In one hand, he held the folder. In the other, a pocket constitution. The auditorium was packed. Students, artists, critics, media giants. Some leaned forward with anticipation. Others sat back smirking behind phones and tablets, cameras already rolling. The panel's title read, "Freedom, Art, and the Cost of Speaking Out." Neutral words, but the atmosphere was anything but. Backstage, Denzel stood still, his charcoal blazer crisp, his expression resolute, the leather folder clasped like a shield. It wasn't heavy, but it might as well have been made of iron. Rachel leaned in. "They just revised the panel script. Kash's quote is the opening slide." Denzel didn't blink. "Of course it is." The moderator, slick hair, expensive glasses, strode onto the stage with the confidence of a man who thinks he's running the show. Welcome, everyone, to what promises to be a lively conversation about the boundaries of speech in modern America. Today, we are joined by journalists, actors, and cultural figures who, well, need no introduction. A smattering of laughter. He smirked. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know why this afternoon's event is already trending. The lights dimmed slightly. The big screen behind him flickered on. And there it was. Denzel Washington is dangerous. What he's spreading isn't free speech. It's cultural sabotage. He needs to be shut down. Fast. Kash Patel, former Chief of Staff, Department of Defense. He needs to be shut down immediately. Kash Patel. The theater erupted. Some rose to their feet clapping. Others booed loudly. Dozens of phones went up like shields and weapons all at once, capturing history as it unfolded. The moderator smirked again. And now the man at the center of that firestorm, Mr. Denzel Washington. A polite, scattered applause followed. It was respectful but cautious. A few audience members clapped with intention, but most were already recording, not welcoming. Near the front row, someone held a handmade sign that read, "Silence isn't censorship, it's safety." Denzel stepped onto the stage, not with haste, not for show, but with steady purpose. He didn't wave, he didn't smile. He walked to his seat, set down the leather folder he carried, and calmly removed a single page. Then, looking squarely at the moderator, he spoke, his voice resonant, clear, undeniable. "If you're going to open with a quote," he said, "you'd better be ready for the rest." Gasps, then silence. To his left, a journalist from The New Yorker glanced nervously at the student panelists beside him. They knew this wasn't a man here to defend himself. This was a man ready to cross-examine the entire system. Denzel sat tall, spine straight, hands firm and steady. His eyes scanned the auditorium. Behind him on the big screen, Kash Patel's now notorious statement still burned across the wall. Phones captured every breath. On the left, smirks. On the right, tension. And still, Denzel leaned into the mic, measured, grounded. He opened the folder. "This morning," and he began, "a former high-ranking government official said I should be silenced." More gasps. "He didn't just disagree with me. He didn't just criticize my ideas. He said I was dangerous and needed to be shut down." He held up the printed statement. "You've seen this part already," he said, tapping the page. "Denzel Washington is dangerous. What he's spreading isn't free speech, it's sabotage. He needs to be shut down." Denzel paused. Then he smiled, not to charm, but to signal the opening volley. "Mr. Patel, if you're watching, I hope your seatbelt's fastened." He turned the page. "Because here's what you said next." He began to read. "Denzel Washington represents everything wrong with modern culture. Nostalgia dressed up as moral authority. His words don't uplift, they infect." The room stirred again. Some audience members clapped. Others froze, their expressions unreadable. Denzel continued, unshaken. "He uses freedom of speech as a smokescreen for divisiveness. If he truly loved this country, he'd stop performing and start listening." Denzel looked up. "Is that what freedom is now?" he asked the crowd. "Reserved only for those who echo your views?" Silence. He flipped to the next page. "I've contacted networks to stop inviting him, told platforms to bury his interviews. What he says isn't dialogue. It's dissent dressed in prestige." Even the moderator shifted in his chair now. Denzel slowly lowered the page onto the table. "Prestige," he said softly. "That's your critique? My resume." The crowd tensed. Denzel leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with the front row. A mix of influencers, students, and journalists. "I read every word. I didn't come here to yell. I came to remind you, truth doesn't need hashtags. It doesn't need retweets. It just needs to be heard." He held up the final sheet. This one he didn't read immediately. He let its weight settle into the room. "And this one," he said, was the quiet part said out loud. He read, "He's a relic weaponized for modern chaos. Dangerous because he's convincing. We shut him down, or he spreads." The entire auditorium froze. No cheers, no sneers, just raw, stunned silence. Denzel placed the last page flat on the table, folded his hands. Then, looking directly at the moderator, he said quietly, "I've been called a lot of things in my life, but I've never been called that honest." Denzel Washington's words hung in the air like a verdict. That final line from Kash Patel, "We shut him down or he spreads," echoed through the minds of every student, every moderator, and every silent journalist watching from the shadows of the back row. The moderator shifted uncomfortably in his seat, fumbling with his cue cards. The other panelists looked visibly rattled. They had come for a debate. But Denzel hadn't brought a rebuttal. He brought a reckoning. He leaned forward again, slowly, deliberately, and then spoke, not with volume but with gravity. "There's something deeply unsettling," he said, his eyes scanning the audience, "about a person who doesn't flinch when you try to shame him." And that's exactly what that statement tried to do. A few students in the back stood and began clapping. hesitant but moved. The rest of the audience remained frozen, watching, thinking, measuring. Denzel gently raised his hand, signaling them to stop. "I don't need applause," he said. "I need honesty from all of you." He reached into his folder and pulled out a small, worn pocket constitution, held it up between two fingers, like a badge. "I swore to uphold this," he said, "not as a lawyer, not as a politician, but as a citizen." He opened it to a bookmarked page. "First Amendment," he read aloud. "Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech." He looked up, his expression still calm, but now undeniably firm. "That includes voices you don't like. That includes opinions you don't agree with. That includes truths that make you uncomfortable." A murmur swept through the room like wind through dry grass. "Kash Patel is a former high-ranking federal official," Denzel continued. "He has every right to challenge my views. He has every right to debate me. But when he uses his platform to demand my silence, that's not democracy." He paused. "That's authoritarianism, just with better branding." The line landed. A ripple of nervous laughter coursed through the crowd. Not mocking, not dismissive, recognition. The moderator leaned toward his mic. "Mr. Washington, if we could shift gears now." Denzel didn't even look at him. "I'm not done." The crowd stirred again, this time louder. Some clapped, others whispered. But this wasn't chaos anymore. This was clarity. He stood up. "I'm 69 years old. I've been called a puppet, a preacher, a threat, a problem. But I've never been called irrelevant, and that's why they're afraid." Then Denzel turned to the nearest live stream camera, spoke not to the room but to the nation. "To every artist, every student, every truth teller watching right now, don't let them reduce you to a soundbite. Don't let them bury you beneath hashtags. They want you silent because your voice shakes them. A beat, then low and measured, and that's how you know it matters." The air shifted, tense, brittle silence. And then the shouting began. A group of students in the upper balcony stood up, holding signs. "Hate speech is not free speech. Protect marginalized voices. Speech has consequences." A young man in a black hoodie, marked with a progressive uprising logo, shouted from the aisle, "You don't get to hide behind the Constitution to spread bigotry." Gasps, cheers, boos. The crowd fractured into noise. Denzel didn't move. He gently set down the Constitution, looked directly at the protester, and spoke. Calm, low, unwavering. "I'm not hiding behind anything, he said. "I'm standing in front of everything they're trying to tear down." A fresh murmur ran through the room. The moderator stood, ready to restore order, but Denzel beat him to it. He turned toward the student protesters. "To those of you who disagree with me, I respect your right to speak. I didn't ask for you to be silenced, and I never will. And I never will." That line landed hard. Even some of the protesters paused. Denzel stood still, unwavering, and then added, his voice steady as stone, "Here's what I won't respect. When one side of an argument decides the other side isn't even allowed to exist." A girl in the front row stood up, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Then what about hate speech?" she demanded. "What about when people like you use freedom to hurt others?" Denzel nodded slowly, acknowledging the weight of the question, not dismissing it, not dodging. "Hate speech exists," he said plainly, "but the real question is, who gets to define it? The person in power? The trending hashtag? The loudest voice in the room?" Silence returned. "I've never used my platform to threaten anyone," he continued, "but I have used it to question everything. And that," he looked across the room, "that's what makes people nervous." One of the panelists, a professor from Columbia University, leaned into the mic and muttered under his breath, "You sure seem rehearsed." Denzel turned to him with calm precision, eyebrows raised, expression cool. "I'm not rehearsed," he said. "I'm prepared. There's a difference." The audience stirred, then scattered applause broke out, not massive, but meaningful. Denzel took a breath and looked around, locking eyes with some of the same students who had heckled him minutes before. "You don't have to like me," he said. You don't even have to agree with me. But if your only response is to shut me down instead of out-argue me, then maybe you're the one who isn't ready. That line hit different. Some protesters sat down, not in surrender, but in recognition. And that's all Denzel needed. He didn't come to convert. He came to make them stay. As he stepped off the stage, his phone vibrated relentlessly. 23 missed calls, 54 unread messages. But none of it mattered compared to the first push notification on his lock screen. The thread is now trending #1 nationwide. Rachel rushed up behind him, breathless. You broke them. CNN is split. MSNBC's calling it a meltdown. Fox already ran with the headline, Denzel versus the deep state. Denzel didn't react. He quietly placed the folder back in his leather bag, adjusted his cufflinks, and asked calmly, Did Kash respond yet? Rachel stared at her phone, eyes wide. He's typing. Seconds later, a new post appeared on Denzel's lock screen. When you need to read someone's statements aloud on stage for attention, maybe your own words aren't strong enough. But I'm glad you finally read something, Denzel. Backstage, the reaction was split. Some groaned, others laughed nervously. Denzel scrolled once, then again, then locked the screen. Good, he said quietly. He's scared. At that very moment, newsrooms lit up. MSNBC, Denzel Washington, brave or brazen. Fox News, Denzel exposes Kash Patel's hypocrisy without raising his voice. The View, was it performance or principle? On X, formerly Twitter, one user posted, Kash told us to silence him. Denzel read the indictment, word for word, with footnotes. Another added, I don't even agree with Denzel politically, but damn, he didn't flinch. And that's what shook me. Within 30 minutes, the clip of Denzel calmly reading Patel's full statement hit 2.8 million views. Edited reels flooded YouTube. Reaction videos surged. The phrase, we shut him down or he spreads, became the emotional and rhetorical center of the debate. Late-night shows cracked jokes. Podcasts lit up with analysis. Young creators stitched the moment on TikTok, pointing to Denzel's poise as the new standard. But the war wasn't over. That night, Kash Patel posted again, I don't debate puppets, I debate policy. If he wants a real fight, no cameras, no theatrics, let's do it. Live, straight. The bait was obvious. Rachel looked at Denzel. He wants you in the ring, for real this time. Denzel didn't blink. She doesn't know I came prepared for round 2. The moment Kash Patel posted that first statement, Denzel had opened a second folder. I've got everything, he told Rachel. Deleted posts, archived clips, flip-flops from the last 3 years. Rachel's eyes widened. You're really going to use those? Denzel gave a faint smile. Use them? No. I'm going to televise them. The invitation came the next morning, 8:46 a.m. sharp. It wasn't polite, it wasn't neutral. It was a declaration of war, dressed as primetime diplomacy, subject, America at the crossroads, free speech, power, and the new political divide. 2 guests, 1 stage, Kash Patel, Denzel Washington. Denzel read the email once, then again. They think they're hosting a conversation, he told Rachel, handing her the phone. But I'm walking in with the closing argument. The preparation wasn't just intense, it was surgical. He pulled old clips, interviews where Kash flipped on tech censorship, 1 month condemning Elon Musk for not banning enough, the next month praising platforms for suspending dangerous voices. He had screenshots, podcast transcripts, archived video, even a 2019 interview where Kash said, I'll never support censorship, even when the speech disgusts me. That's America. Denzel circled it in red ink. This, he said, is Exhibit A. By 6:55 p.m., he stood outside CNN's Manhattan studio, his black suit crisp, a leather folder in one hand, a pocket constitution in the other. Inside, Anderson Cooper was already live. Tonight, Cooper began, we witnessed one of the most anticipated conversations of the year, a national security powerhouse and a cultural icon. 2 titans, only one will control the narrative. The lights dimmed, the music faded, cameras rolled. Welcome to America at the Crossroads, Cooper said. Tonight's guests, former National Security Advisor Kash Patel and Academy Award-winning actor and public advocate Denzel Washington. Applause broke, but it wasn't unified. Kash offered a confident smile. Denzel didn't blink. Cooper turned to Kash first. Mr. Patel, in your recent statement, you said Denzel Washington is a danger to national cohesion, that he should be silenced. Do you stand by that? Kash, ever composed, gave a practiced chuckle. I said dangerous rhetoric should be challenged, and if that makes people uncomfortable, maybe it should. Denzel didn't interrupt, didn't react. He simply waited. Cooper turned to him. Mr. Washington, your response? Denzel opened his folder slowly, calmly. I brought the receipts. He placed the printed quote on the table, face up. Anderson, he said, he didn't challenge me. He campaigned to erase me. Then he slid a sheet across the desk, highlighted, time-stamped. This is from 2010. Same man, different values. He quoted it out loud. I'll never support censorship, even when the speech disgusts me. That's America. Kash narrowed his eyes. That quote's out of context. Denzel looked up, calm. I have the full audio. Want me to play it? The room tensed. Cooper blinked. Are you saying? Denzel nodded once. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to read the record. Line by line. He tapped his phone. A clip played. Kash's own voice, clear and unmistakable. Even when I hate what they say, I'll defend their right to say it. I'll never push for censorship. Labeled, dated, verified. Silence washed over the studio. Cooper sat still, off script. Kash cleared his throat, tried to smile. That was 4 years ago. Context matters. Denzel leaned forward, voice steady, tone sharp. And yet, 24 hours ago, you demanded I be silenced. Not debated, not questioned. Silenced. He pulled out another sheet. This one's from 2021. You praised Twitter for removing accounts you said threatened democracy. But last month, you criticized Elon Musk for letting those same accounts back. Kash Patel tried to cut in, his voice tightening. Those accounts spread violence. Denzel calmly overrode him. They shared articles, just like I do. The difference is you only want some voices heard. The crowd stirred. Even the studio lights seemed to hold their breath. Anderson Cooper tried to steer the discussion. Let's stick to the issue of public platforms. But Denzel raised a single finger, not to silence, but to signal there was more. He tapped his phone again. A second clip played. Kash Patel, 2022, on a podcast, praising a controversial campus speaker ban. If certain voices trigger violence or hate, we don't owe them a microphone. Denzel looked directly at him, and I guess I'm one of those voices now. Kash lost his rhythm, posture tightening, fingers gripping the edge of the table. You manipulate what I say, he snapped. You cherry pick. Denzel calmly opened his folder wide. I didn't bring a cherry-picked sample, Mr. Patel. I brought the whole tree. The audience murmured, clips from the debate already being cut, posted, trending. A hashtag emerged. Denzel has receipts. Anderson Cooper, now visibly impressed, asked, Are you saying Mr. Patel is being intentionally inconsistent? Denzel didn't hesitate. I'm saying he doesn't believe in silencing all speech, just the speech he can't control. Kash scoffed. You're twisting the truth. Denzel's eyes locked on his, voice steady. No, Mr. Patel, I'm quoting you, out loud, unedited, on record, exactly what you tried to prevent. A crackle of electricity seemed to run through the studio. You could feel it. The narrative, so carefully curated and controlled, was slipping away. Denzel hadn't raised his voice. He was just pressing play. Kash sat forward, his frustration showing now, his practiced calm beginning to fracture. You think reading statements and playing old clips makes you some kind of truth teller? You're just a mouthpiece for chaos, Denzel. You don't stand for unity. You stand for division. Denzel didn't blink. I stand for something you've forgotten. Kash smirked, voice low. And what's that? Denzel let the moment breathe, then said clearly into the mic, the right to speak, even when it makes people like you uncomfortable. A ripple of gasps swept the studio. The air grew heavy, the audience unsure whether to applaud or hold their breath. Denzel leaned back, utterly calm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't clap back. He let the weight of truth settle where noise couldn't reach. Kash laughed, but the sound was hollow. "You're a fraud, Denzel. You're just here for the spotlight, not for unity." Denzel didn't respond to him. He turned to Anderson Cooper. "You asked if this was a debate," he said. "It's not." He looked to the camera, speaking to America. "This was a mirror, and I held it up, not just for him, but for everyone watching who still believes censorship is strength and silence is virtue." Anderson Cooper, usually unflappable, struggled to find words. I think we need a break." But the audience had already made up their minds. Applause broke, hesitant at first, then swelling, especially from those who had come skeptical, from those who expected empty rhetoric but instead saw a thread unravel and the truth laid bare. Not a call to protect democracy, a call to control it. The live comment stream on CNN's digital broadcast exploded. He dismantled him without ever raising his voice. This isn't politics, this is principle. Denzel Washington just gave a master class. Kash Patel sat stiffly, arms folded, jaw locked. Denzel gathered his notes slowly, deliberately, the dark gleam of his blazer catching the light. As the screen faded to commercial, Anderson Cooper's voice, barely caught by a hot mic, summed up the moment. That wasn't a debate, that was a dismantling. The second CNN cut to commercial, the internet detonated. Reddit threads blew up. Clips of Denzel reading unedited receipts trended everywhere. Within minutes, Fox News posted a highlight reel. Denzel versus Patel, the night the narrative broke. A 12-second TikTok clip, just Denzel saying, "The right to speak even when it makes people like you uncomfortable," hit 5 million views before midnight. On X, conservative voices declared, "He walked in with evidence. He walked out with a movement." But it wasn't just the right. Moderate and even liberal voices paused. A Columbia student posted, "I don't agree with Denzel politically, but he didn't lie, and that's rare." A centrist commentator tweeted, "This wasn't a takedown. It was a revelation. Kash had sound bites, Denzel had facts." Meanwhile, Kash Patel's account stayed silent for hours. No victory thread, no rebuttal, just silence. And in that silence, Denzel's presence only grew louder. He walked out of the CNN studio into a crush of cameras. Reporters shouted questions, but he didn't grandstand. He held up the Constitution in one hand, the now crumpled printouts of Kash's statements in the other. "My job isn't to yell louder," he said, "it's to make sure the truth echoes longer." Within minutes, Trump reposted the viral clip. "He's a star. The old guard is crumbling. The new generation rises proud." Breitbart ran with, "Denzel didn't blink. Patel did." The Atlantic offered a cautious take. Washington's calm could reshape the playbook for cultural debates. MSNBC aired a late-night panel arguing that Denzel's words were dangerous, but even among critics, some hesitated to condemn him outright. In the days that followed, university groups invited Denzel to speak. Young activists made his words into T-shirts and posters. Even independents and moderates began quoting his final line. This wasn't a debate, it was a mirror. 3 days later, Kash Patel returned to social media. No fiery thread, no direct response. Just a vague, half-hearted post. "Politics shouldn't be performance. We need substance." But it was too late. Denzel didn't need performance. He just needed a microphone, and the truth his opponent's narrative tried to bury. And when he read it out loud, America listened. In an age where tweets are weapons and silence is a strategy, Denzel Washington chose neither. He chose the microphone. He didn't just defend himself, he exposed the entire game, one page at a time, one contradiction at a time. And when the dust settled, it wasn't just a thread that unraveled. It was the illusion that anyone could ever silence him. Not now, not ever.